sword friends, welcome back to my YouTube channel. I'm Brittany. Today I am joined by my good friend Sean Franklin, and we are going to be talking about our very first tournament experiences.
As Brittany so kindly introduced, my name is Sean Franklin. I've been around few HEMA clubs all over. I used to be a very active tournament participant. Unfortunately, my body has moved beyond that level of ability, and I'm sitting on a couch doing YouTube videos now.
It's not the worst thing ever, I guess. So I guess back in the day, what was your first tournament experience?
My first tournament was WWOC in 2012 in Germany, actually.
What is WWOC?
That was subtly named, they called themselves the Worldwide Opium Championships.
Okay.
And no one else called them that.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'm guessing no one else here has heard about that competition, so you can see how well that claim worked out for them.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough.
Yeah, so it was in Germany. The main draw of going to Germany was less than that was the appropriate venue for my first tournament, more as that was part of a fun European trip to kind of get involved in HEMA at that time. It was nine months after I had started. So.
Oh wow, yeah. That's pretty quick, I think, to jump right into not just your first tournament, but your first international tournament and going overseas and for your very first time. And how did that kind of work out for you mentally?
So fortunately, I've grown up in sports, all my life. So just generally, I'm not, I guess, easily intimidated. Yeah. So it wasn't really a big deal to me. So it was just kind of like, oh yeah, it's just this same routine, just going somewhere different, trying a new sport, but nothing I really had seen before. So I didn't really think of it as a stress thing. It was just like, okay, I'm gonna do it. I can win some matches. I can I go get beat up. I can whatever.
Yeah.
It's not a big deal either way,
Yeah.
which is kind of a luxury. Now that I've coached a few people through the first tournaments, I realize kind of it's a luxury that I was able to enjoy that.
Yeah, I think most people that go into their very first tournaments have very little sport or competitive sport backgrounds to begin with, and that's usually the very first time they experience that is somebody on the other side of a ring with a sword trying to hit them, and there's not really much you can do to prepare for that other than just hit the ground and hopefully run instead of just hit the ground and just go whoop.
Yeah. Hit the ground figuratively rather than literally.
Yes. My first tournament experience was in January of 2015 in Tacoma, Washington. So technically my first tournament was also international. Not nearly the same distance or requiring an airplane. But it was, I don't know if it had an official name, it was just sort of a beginner's synthetic tournament hosted by Seven Swords Academy, and it was just synthetic longsword. And that was interesting. I think at that point, I'd been doing HEMA for a little while, so I was a beginner in the sense of I'd never competed before, but I definitely think compared to a lot of the people that were my competitors or the people I had to fight against, I think I had more experience going into it. But I certainly wasn't mentally prepared. Like you said, I never really had a competitive background, so I went into it very much as you're describing, I have no idea what to expect and what's coming. So at your first tournament experience, what categories or category did you fight in?
So I fought leather Dusac, which if you're looking for modern leather Dusac tournament videos, you won't find them.
I was going to say, it's not very popular anymore.
No, part of the reason was gear around that point. People did not have good HEMA gear. That was right on the transition where it was starting to come out, but there was not as widespread of an acceptance of it. And then, people, were first interested, Dusac, or it's a more, historical KDF thing. And then eventually said, okay, well, we can just do steel stuff with other weapons. Let's not do this anymore.
So it was just leather Dusac for that?
So the tournament had more stuff, but that was all that I didn't actually, because also back then it took longer to get your gear. So I had proper, sparring gear coming, and it actually arrived at that tournament where my longsword gear showed up. And I never sparred longsword prior to that. I drilled it, but I'd never sparred it, so I just
Oh, interesting. Okay. So there was other stuff. It wasn't like you went all the way to Germany just to fight with leather.
So I only fought in the leather Dusac, but there was also a longsword and rapier tournament there, which I did not fight in.
I see. Did you watch it?
Huh?
Like, did you watch the?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. And then, having done just the leather stuff, and you said your gear arrived at the tournament.
Yeah.
Like, did you do any free sparring while you were there, or did you sort of just take it all in?
I did some, not really longsword free sparring, no, but lots of there was lots of Dusac free sparring there, which you also wouldn't see at an event. So
yeah, it's funny how like not popular that is anymore, and then how 10 years ago it was like one of the most popular things. I think you hit the nail on the head with it being more of a gear thing and the availability of gear at the time. But yeah, now that I think about it, going back to like my very first sort of year of training, I focused so heavily on Dusac. And now it's probably been almost 4 years since I've even held one. Like I have no idea. Like I don't have any here in the studio. Yeah, it just totally fell off the trend wagon there. Yeah. So in this first tournament, how did you prepare for it, or I guess how prepared did you feel?
I felt actually very prepared. I also, unlike everyone watching at home looking for advice on your first tournament, I'm probably like the worst possible example. Because I had, a bunch of advantages going into it
that most people don't.
That most people don't. So right away, I was actually looking to get into something where I could train hard, because that's the culture growing up, was high performance sports, where you just basically have no life and just train every day for several hours.
Right.
So that was normal to me. That's not just how you train.
Yeah, and you did kayaking.
Yes, I did competitive kayaking growing up.
Right.
So I was looking for something new to do. So I said, oh, this cool HEMA thing. And then right from the get-go, I was already in extremely good shape. And I'm just like, oh, it's a new thing. Let's just start training 20 hours a week at it.
As one does.
So even though I was 9 months in, I had probably accumulated more time training than lots of people who had been doing it for 3 or 4 years.
Yes.
By that point. Yes. So I was when I say 9 months in, that's a little bit of a misleading number.
Yeah, for sure. I get that, because I kind of had a similar thing with my first tournament experience. Like I'd said, it was my very first time competing, so I think mentally I wasn't really super prepared. But I wasn't necessarily like, oh, I've only been doing this for like 3 or 4 months. I think at that point, I started in 2011 for my very first HEMA class, but then I'd taken a pretty long break and then came back to it, I think, in late 2013 or early 2014. So I'd had almost a year of training, which is not really nowadays considered a beginner. But, some people maybe, I don't think, really knew I don't think there was a hard rule set for the beginners tournament as to like how much experience you could have. And there's definitely people in that tournament who were more experienced than me, and then significantly less experienced. So I was kind of almost not quite in the middle, but a little bit above average. But I spent so much time on the training floor. I think for most people doing HEMA, or at least 10 years ago, you'd put one or two nights a week into it, where it's like maybe an hour of class and an hour of sparring, and that's nothing compared to somebody who does that for a year versus somebody who takes 3 months of training, and it's like, I'm training 20 hours a week for 4 months. It's like, you're gonna get really good really fast compared to somebody who's been doing it a year but only training once or twice a week, right? So yeah, I definitely went into it feeling physically very prepared. I had all the experience in terms of the training, but mentally I was not there. But I mean, I don't have to tell you that. you know what I was like.
For the record, I was training in the same school at Brittany at the time. I did not go to this tournament, but I was aware of the group of people going.
That's right. Sean and I go back. We trained together in Canada for many years. Sean's been in my corner for many, many, many tournaments, but this very first one, he was actually not there. So I don't think, I'm sure, some new stories for him too. So leather dussac, as we've already mentioned, it used to be very trendy. We've already kind of touched a little bit on how like gear had maybe influenced its decline in popularity. So I guess that sort of leads me to ask you, how has gear requirements or rules changed since your first tournament experience?
Yes, a lot.
Yeah.
HEMA has changed a lot since then. So, number one, leather dussac's gone.
Rip.
That was also the time we were just coming out, with purpose-made HEMA gloves and jackets and stuff. So you, before that, were seeing lacrosse gloves in longsword tournaments,
yes,
which you don't see anymore, for very good reasons.
Yeah.
And DIY stuff, much more common.
So much DIY.
And so that's, most tournaments won't even allow that anymore.
Yeah.
And the proportion of people who are using it is also, or trying to use it, is also much less. So, the overall quality of gear has improved, and the effects in the injury rates as a result of us using proper gear, injuries have gone down because of it. That's shocking.
Yeah.
But there was actually resistance and long drama HEMA stories with that, but we're trending towards better gear, and that's the important part. So that's been a major positive change in tournaments, and we have more availability of gear. We have higher standards for gear for tournaments. So all of that has been a great.
So what did you compete in any gear then that wouldn't be allowed now?
So I was doing the dussac only,
right.
So there was less gear requirements. Generally, I was just wearing gloves, elbows.
Like just your standard like lacrosse gloves?
Yeah.
Okay, which for leather dussac
For
is
leather
like,
dussac, they're
that's
fine. So I don't view the gear I was competing in there would be inappropriate if you were doing something like a dussac or a single stick or whatnot. So I think that would still be more or less kind of state of the art today.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay.
And actually the longsword gear that I mentioned that showed up was also kind of the standard longsword gear that we're using today.
Yeah.
Just at that time, it was the cutting edge new gear that they were selling, the new stuff that we're selling.
Yeah, I can relate. When I did my first tournament in 2015, the gear I was using was not great. I got my Spez jacket, which was a really big deal because I think at that point Spez was really the only like manufactured jacket, or like that you could have a certain quality standard that was like expected, whereas everything else was sort of like homemade gambesons and stuff, or like borrowed stuff from the SCA, and I think Spez was like the very first like real dedicated HEMA jacket with like Newton ratings and all sorts of stuff. So I got my jacket, which was great. I had a mask that was like way too big for me. You know what? I'd have to pull up the video because I don't remember, but I know for a really long time leading up to that tournament, I was training with, and you'll know exactly what I'm talking about, I had lacrosse gloves, and then we had taken IKEA cutting boards.
Oh yeah,
You know exactly where this is going.
About,
Taking IKEA cutting boards, cutting out plates, wrapping them in hockey tape, and then cutting like two little holes in them to like loop them together to create like articulated like plastic plates.
Have you ever heard of Dutch knuckles?
Yes!
Okay, so a bunch of people watching, and anyone who's watching this will appreciate how far HEMA has come. So Dutch knuckles is under your lacrosse gloves, you break popsicle sticks and you put segments on your hand and tape them to your hands and inside your glove. The idea being if you get a hard enough hit, it will break the popsicle stick and disperse some of the energy before it breaks your hand.
As a mechatronic engineer, in your professional opinion, how accurate is that?
Oh, 100%.
Really? Okay.
I mean, obviously it's only so reliable. You're like taping popsicle sticks to your hand.
I guess if it was that good, we'd still do it.
It's a huge pain in the ass, and I mean, if you don't get hit on the stick,
It's just off to the side.
Yeah. But in terms of actually, basically the energy that goes, any bit of energy that goes into breaking the popsicle stick does not go into breaking your hand. Now, if you get hit hard enough, it could break both.
Both, yeah, right.
But yes, it's a very, if you are going to fight in lacrosse gloves, which we know is a bad idea, Mechanically speaking, that is a way to mitigate the risk.
Yes, and we don't advocate for that.
Do not do that. That's a dumb idea. But
so how did tournament rules change then compared to now? Because I find like as time goes on, you can look back at previous years and think like, okay, this trend started coming up. Oh, we started awarding more points for thrusts to try and facilitate certain behaviors. So how has the tournament kind of meta in terms of rules, how has that changed since the first tournament you competed in?
So it's a very dangerous question to ask me because I started a blog just to talk about mathematical analysis of rule sets.
Yes.
Plug my swordstem.com.
Swordstem! Link in the description below.
Yeah. So I love to talk about tournament stats and how rules affect them.
Yeah.
But yeah, at a high level, that was just as people were starting to design HEMA tournament rule sets, and they were very bad at it.
No bones about it. They were just bad at it.
Yes. So definitely we've improved in that since then. And then the judging is a whole other aspect. But
that's its own video.
Yeah, it's its own video. But we'll just talk about the rules. The way the rules were designed in that tournament was that everything was 1 point, and that if you doubled enough, I think there was 3 double limit. I'm not sure that worked, but what I really remember is that the afterblow was also worth 1 point.
So it would like negate or like
it would completely negate any attack. You were up by 1 point, and then you just afterblowed every single attack after that, you would win.
Okay, so there's a lot of
there was a
potential
lot
to game that.
of afterblows being thrown in that tournament.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah, it wasn't super pretty. So I was not a fan of that format, and so different rule sets. I wouldn't say diverge from that because that would be saying that they're all based on this one, but
sure.
There's different theories of rule design. But when they are doing weighted or when you're doing full afterblow rules, you weight the targets.
Right.
So at least you're trying to encourage them. If someone's hitting you in the head, you can't just hit them in the flank after to get an afterblow. I mean, you can, but they're still gaining points on you.
Right, exactly.
So there's some element of rules designed there as opposed to, okay, we're just going to throw this simple thing out there and see what happens. There wasn't as much thought going into these rules back then. And to be fair, people hadn't done something and saw that it was a bad idea and then realized how to fix it. It's earlier days.
Yeah.
So we kind of know what the bad ideas are. Or if you do this, they're going to do this to some extent now, where that knowledge didn't exist back then.
Yeah. So when I had done my very first tournament, it was kind of, I don't want to say it was the same because I don't actually remember the specific rule set, but I don't think it was so different from what we have now. I think it was always like, head is worth the most points, and then it sort of like goes down from there as it goes out through the extremities. I think there's your basic afterblow rules. There's, your basic double rules, and nothing really too crazy. But I think that's because a lot of the tournaments in that region, which was all West Coast, anything from like Vancouver, Seattle, Portland, Los Angeles, that whole kind of strip down the coast, had a very like homogenous culture in terms of like how tournaments were being run. Obviously there's some outliers, but I think like the big ones that happened in that region had very similar rule sets. So for a really long time I was very used to competing under the same rule sets again and again and again. So when I started, there was no tournament software, there was no it was all like hand tracked on paper.
Oh yeah.
You remember those days?
The dark ages.
Yeah, and then we had the wonderful creation of scorecard. HEMAScoreCard. How has that changed the game?
Yes, so that's very nice. So plug link in the description.
Link in the description below.
HEMAScoreCard.com. HEMAScoreCard is a free tournament software that basically keeps track of all the matches, pools, and everything. Makes the results accessible to the competitors, and I think at least as a competitor, knowing these things actually takes a lot of stress out, saying like, what pool are they on? When do I have to go?
Yeah.
Especially, I mean, as an experienced competitor, you get used to that, being like, oh, I see this dude that I recognize is fighting, and I know they're in pool 3 and I'm in pool 5, so I feel confident going to run to the bathroom.
Right, yeah, you kind of get a feel for it. But for somebody who's not as experienced, there's that panic. And I've seen this happen so many times at events where somebody thinks they have time to leave the tournament hall, or they're late coming back from lunch and they just have no idea, and they get like disqualified or they forfeit their match, and it's like, oh, I didn't know. Well, scorecard solves that.
Exactly. Yeah, it's getting used to the uncertainty. Even if you have sports experiences, different sports organize in different ways, and you may have more or less uncertainty. Like if you're doing track and field, for instance, you have a start time, and you know exactly when it's going to start. Whereas a HEMA tournament, unless you're like the highest levels of organization, you don't know when your pool is going to start. You just know if you're in pool 4, you will start whenever pool 3 ends.
And HEMA tournaments are notoriously late for everything. Like
exactly.
You have your schedule, you think you're going to make it, and you always need buffer time. So that was when scorecards started getting implemented. It was awesome because you can also be on your phone and sort of follow it along kind of as it's happening. And now there's a database of it, so you can go back. You can actually look at old matches and see what the scores were and stuff, which ends up being really, really useful because I definitely use it. I'll go back and I'll be like, oh, when this person fought that person, how did that shake out? How many doubles were there? What kind of afterblows were there? And there's so much data in there to just keep preparing for myself and for my students. Yeah,
and I remember staying up, well, not late, but staying at the tournament hall so that the organizers can post a sheet of paper that has the pool advancements on it.
Yeah, and bless the people that ran tournaments back then and did do it that way. But man, as a competitor, it's just...
I can assure you the person who was up late in the tournament hall tabulating stats would have also rather been at the bar, and they are staying there for the benefit of everyone who's fighting. So
everybody leaves, goes and has drinks, and they eat dinner, and the poor person stuck having to do all that tabulation is like, God, get me out of here.
That was the inspiration for me writing HEMAScoreCard, was me being the person tabulating and being like, okay, I do not want to do this next time.
Yeah. So first tournament experiences, obviously, I think, set a lot in motion in terms of how we carry on through HEMA. So how, if at all, did your first tournament experience in Germany influence the rest of your HEMA career and have you ending up here as you are now?
So I don't know that it changed the trajectory of anything, but seeing it all in action kind of helped me really understand what the current state of the art, so to speak, in HEMA, especially because it was a bigger event, overseas. So I kind of got to see, okay, well, this is the level that HEMA is at right now, which was relatively low, so to speak, much lower than it is now, and I mean it's still getting better year over year as we get better. Yeah. I'm specifically talking about logistics right now, but skill level.
No, he's really shit-talking people.
Well, guess what? When we look back at this 10 years from now, we're going to say we're much better skill-wise than we are as well. But logistically, we're still growing now. And seeing where it was and saying okay, well, this is where we are. Because in addition to just joining as a competitor, I had a background in sports administration and whatnot, coaching sports administration and stuff before I joined. So when I was joining HEMA, I was wanting to hit people over the head with swords, which is awesome. But I was also saying okay, this is something new that I can help contribute to. And then this is where we are. So now I kind of see where we need to go with the next steps and how can I help be a part of making that better. So I wouldn't say that it really changed or influenced where it was going, but it was just kind of feedback for me to understand what this HEMA thing was all about, because no one knows when you start.
Yeah, for sure. For me, I think when I went to my very first tournament, I was a ball of nerves. Go figure.
Shocking.
I know. And I think what it did for me was, the big thing is I fought in an open tournament, and it was just sort of a mixed bag of people, and my first pool was really huge dudes, giants, and there's actually a picture of me just zverking this dude under his arms, but he's got to be massive compared to me. It looks absurd, the picture. But it really solidified for me, because I had a lot of self-doubt about being like, oh, I'm 95 pounds at the time. I'm not anymore. But at the time when I started, I was about 95 pounds, and I'm like, oh, I'm too small to do this, and I'm not really certain that I'm able to, be competitive or be on that level. And I actually did really, really well in that tournament, and I really surprised myself, and I was able to hold my own, and ended up getting like some grapples and some cool stuff. I think it's like the first time I stabbed somebody was in that tournament. And it really solidified that, oh, hey, you can do the thing. You're tiny, but you can do it. And that really set a fire in me to be like, okay, this is not a disadvantage in the sense of, physically being small is a disadvantage, but not so much that it's like a don't bother trying kind of thing. It made it feel possible and capable. The other thing that very first tournament showed me was, and I carry this still to this day, is being very serious when you are competing. And when I was at that event, two dudes decided that in their fight they were going to protest part of the rule set. I don't remember the details of what they were protesting or what rule set they didn't like. I don't recall. But they discarded their swords in the bronze medal match, decided to just do wrestling instead. And in that whole action, one of them ended up breaking his ankle in 3 places. And it was supposed to be like a goofy sort of like FU to the tournament. And because he was from Canada, but we were competing in the United States, and the panic was, oh no, there's no, we can't get help here medically, we have to drive him back over the border. So there was this mad dash to just load this poor guy up into the back of somebody's truck and fly home over the border to a Canadian medical center where he ended up getting surgery. I don't remember, but I know that it was a very serious break in 3 places. And that experience for me was like, from a organizer perspective, from a coaching perspective, you don't want to take it so seriously that you can't enjoy the sport, but you also don't want to throw out safety and be very flippant about it to the point where you put yourself or others in danger. And ever since that moment, I've been very, very serious about how I coach my students. So I'm running class and people start goofing off. It's like, hey, you have weapons in your hands. Like you are doing things to other people, and they require, to trust you that you can be safe. And ever since that event, I've been really, really hard on that, because I just watched some dude shatter his ankle. So I guess that kind of, it makes me, obviously that's how it impacted my career going forward in HEMA, is being really serious, being respectful of the art or the martial art that you're doing, being respectful of your opponent and the event and everything like that. So my advice usually for first-time competitors is, be respectful of each other, of your opponent, of yourself, the people putting on the event. There's so much that goes into it, and being very present in the moment. And it's very tempting sometimes when you're under stress to sort of just be flippant and laugh it off and be silly, because if you're being goofy, then you're not really doing badly, you're just being goofy, right? And so trying to be serious enough to be safe, but not so serious that you can't enjoy it, would usually be my first piece of advice. So then, Sean, what is your piece of advice that you give a first-time competitor based on your experience?
All right, so based on my experience at that tournament, I would say, be prepared to be outside of your comfort zone. And now the obvious answer, the obvious implication of that is just that it's going to be a higher stress thing than you're used to, and so just you're going there to just fight, and then your result is going to be what your result is.
Right.
Whether it's first or last, that's just you just do it one exchange at a time, and get it done. But also, the specific part that was applicable more to me was that they're going to do things differently than you're used to doing it.
That is so true.
and it might be worse, it might be better, but if it's worse, just whatever. They put the event on. If you think it's dumb, just don't come back next year.
Or complain about it loudly on Facebook in a vague way.
Yeah, so, usually people will be appreciative if you give them positive feedback.
Right.
You know, or maybe you just, okay, you're so pissed off, whatever, but just appreciate the effort they put in. Okay, maybe they didn't do a good job, but they're you know, no one's really making a ton of money off this, so just appreciate the effort. If it wasn't what you were looking for, and that's also the case, is people do HEMA for different reasons. So the event organizer might be putting on the event for a different thing than you were really interested in. You know, if that's the case, then okay, it just wasn't for you. Just go somewhere else. So be prepared to have things not the way that you're used to or that you like, and then just roll with it.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. I think having the sort of right perspective and knowing like why you do HEMA and that other people don't do it for the same reasons and why you're competing, and trying to have realistic goals in that. You know, I think that's what a lot of people, especially first-time competitors, get really hung up on, is like, you know, oh, I'm doing it for fun. But then if they're doing it for fun, they get so hyper-focused on winning that it's like, well, is it fun?
The judges will miss stuff.
That is
things
true.
that you think were super obvious, the judges will miss. And you must be used to it, and you will accept it. You will get times you obviously hit them, you will not get points for, and times they didn't even hit you, they will get points for. And just roll with it.
How often did that happen in your first tournament?
Oh, yeah.
A lot?
A lot. But it happens, I mean, the thing is, you judge a tournament by how good it is, by how often it happens, not if it never happens. And be ready for it. And especially if you're doing a beginner's tournament and a local tournament, the judging is probably going to be worse than like a very high level tournament.
For sure.
It's just, you know, the judging is hard.
It is.
You know, until you get out there and judge and you start missing calls. And don't be afraid to get out and judge, and you will miss calls, and it just happens, and we deal with it. But after a little while, I mean, you always get it stings a little, you get a little salty when a judge makes a mistake. But you get over it quickly if you're used to it. You're just like, oh, whatever, okay, next exchange. But if you're not used to that, and you let it sting for an extended period of time and throw your game off and ruin the whole event, like, that's not helping anyone. You know?
Yeah, definitely. I think just being ready, having a good sense of like why you're there, what you're doing, and being, I think the word I'm looking for is like just respectful of the judges. These are people who are volunteering their time. They are standing there so that you can be there and fight. Because without judges, there's no tournament, right? It's just sparring. Yeah. So yeah, that is basically my first tournament experience in a nutshell. Sean, anything else?
I would just encourage people who have not competed in a tournament to go out and get your first tournament experience. A lot of people stigmatize tournaments in HEMA as like, oh, I'm not serious enough to go to a tournament. As far as I'm concerned, as long as you have enough experience to not be a danger to yourself or others, go ahead and have fun. Like, can you imagine someone saying like, oh, well, I've been practicing baseball for 4 years in a park, but I don't know if I'm really ready to go out to like play a baseball game.
Right? Yeah.
You know, it's just okay, maybe you're someone serious and you really want to use the tournament to hone your skills, and it's a stepping stone. Maybe you just want to go out and fight some people and have fun. Like it doesn't have to be intimidating. I would encourage you just go, just fight. Don't make the tournament into a bigger deal than it is. We don't have to have a HEMA culture where there's like the tournament people who are super serious, and then, you know, if you're not really serious, you don't compete. You know, obviously there will be super serious people, but just because you're not super serious doesn't mean you can't go to a tournament and enjoy fighting some people in a little more, you know, controlled environment. So I would, you know, if you're waffling, get out there and do it. And if you're not waffling, still get out there and do it.
So just go out there and do it.
Just go out there and do it. All right.
I think that's a really good point, because so Mordhau had gone to Combat Con not too long ago, and we went with like 13 people, but I think only like 8 of them were competing, and a lot of them had gone just to experience the tournament and the whole kind of event environment first. And then we came back and kind of debriefed on the whole thing, and everybody else who just came to watch and experience it, they were like, oh, I need to go next year, I need to compete.
Yes.
And I was like, yes, good. So it should be something that I think everybody who does HEMA at least experiences once, if not to actually like compete, to kind of be there and see that environment. But I really do encourage, like Sean said, everybody to at least try a competitive tournament at least once. I think it changes so much of your perspective on fighting and how you interpret certain things within HEMA. So that's it, guys. Thank you so much for joining us. Sean, you know how much I love having you around. I really appreciate you doing this video with me. All the links are in the description below, and thank you so much, as always, for watching.